We often joke around here that everything can be boiled down to salmon, dams, or wolves. And indeed, much of what Courtney Flatt covers involves those topics. She covers natural resources and the environment. And one of the stories she covered this year was about salmon being reintroduced behind Grand Coulee and Chief Joseph dams on the upper Columbia River, and why the Colville tribe was so happy to see that happen.
When those dams were built, there was no fish passage built along with them. They effectively blocked all of these hundreds of miles of streams and salmon habitat from salmon that needed to migrate up or down river. Back a long time ago, about 80 years ago, the tribes even had a ceremony of tears at Kettle Falls in northeastern Washington when the last run of salmon made it past the dam's construction. And so they've been fighting really for decades and decades to get salmon to be released beyond these dams, to be in these traditional historical habitat. And in fact, they even started a nearby hatchery to help achieve that goal. It's really kind of been recently a matter of funding, and there are still some questions to answer, things like diseases and invasive species, and just a few other questions they need to answer. And so that's why they're planning on some experimental releases in the years to come, kind of smaller releases and larger releases, just to see what happens. And so that's kind of the next steps in the process.
So you, Courtney, talked to a lot of people while you were there on site reporting this story, and from a cultural aspect, it was of course very important to the Colville tribal members who you talked to. Can you just talk about some of their experiences and what they said to you about how important this day was for them?
Yeah, and so it was really kind of an emotional thing just to watch the first salmon be released into this river where salmon hadn't been since the 1950s. So what they did is they kind of lined up shoulder to shoulder and passed salmon in these really large kind of rubbery bags from the truck that had hauled them from the hatchery to the river, and then people were able to hold the fish one at a time and let them go into the river. Some kind of like splashed around, and some just took off immediately. So people were really emotional. They didn't have many words to describe what exactly they were feeling. They said that the salmon were coming home finally, and we're just really overjoyed that maybe in a few years they'd be able to fish for salmon here, and definitely, hopefully, their grandchildren would eventually be able to fish for salmon in these traditional places.
The United States and Canada are currently renegotiating the Columbia River Treaty. Courtney has been covering those negotiations, which are ongoing. You can find out more about that at nwpb.org, along with all of these stories that we have covered this year. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.